Hey folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer Podcast. I'm your host, Logan Swanson. And here we talk about all things land related, buying land, selling land, developing land, all sorts of good stuff as it relates to land. Today we're doing a solo pod, no guest today. I'm pretty excited about that. And we're digging into a market that has been a favorite of mine. We've bought and sold a lot of land in this market. And we'll get to that in a minute. We're talking about Brewster County, Texas. Anyways, as usual, if you're looking to buy or sell land, go to primelandexchange.com. Check us out. We're rolling out tons of new properties over the next month. We've got a bunch of new ones live on the website. If you need land funding, you're a land flipper and you need funding for your deals, go to landpartnerfunding.com. Check us out there. And if you like the podcast, subscribe and rate us. We're everywhere, okay? And there's a video version if you want to see my ugly mug. Just check it out on YouTube. Okay, well, let's get into it. One of the things that I wanted to focus on today is obviously this specific county, but maybe even more than that is the fact that you can successfully invest in land pretty much anywhere. The constraints vary, okay? So you can either be very successful in a very hot, busy city market. You know, I've seen people who are land flipping in LA. You know, it's hard to get busier than that, right? Or you can be out in the loneliest, most desolate areas. And that's what we got here in Brewster County, Texas. If you're unfamiliar, Brewster County, Texas is the biggest county in the state of Texas, which is a big old state. Let's see, I took some notes here. So this is covering over 6,192 square miles. And it has a tiny population. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 towns in there. Terlingua, Alpine, Marathon, just a handful. None of them are more than a few thousand people in each of them. So this area was inhabited by, obviously, like most of America, inhabited by Native Americans for a long time. The Apache and Comanche were out there. In the colonial area, the Spanish and other Europeans got involved. There's not a whole lot of utility to the land outside of kind of what you'd expect, okay? They have traditionally done cattle herding, a little bit of agriculture, farming of sorts, and then harvesting minerals. So silver, mercury, copper, all that was harvested out of the soil for a while. And then it got its big boom in the 1900s when the Southern Pacific Railroad ran through Alpine, which made it today's booming metropolis. But most people out there are visiting today because of Big Bend National Park. This is the biggest national park in Texas. I think it's the only mountain in Texas is in Big Bend National Park. And that's really what kind of drives the market out there. When I started buying land, I think the first property I bought out here was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and we were buying at about $100 an acre, maybe $90 an acre. And we were really trying to resell at around $500 or $600 an acre. And we had to owner finance everything. There's very little opportunity there when we started for selling a property cash. Now that does exist a little more now, and we'll get into how that market has changed. But to give you perspective, that's why we started in this area. We actually started in a neighboring county over here. Actually, there's one in between, but we started in Culberson County, Texas. This is Brewster County here. And it's very similar. I was like, oh, well, let's just go to the area that has the most land and let's go buy and sell cheap land there. And we did. We sent direct mail. Somebody out in the 60s, I would say, went through Brewster County all around Big Bend National Park area and just went nuts. I mean, they were cutting up 5, 10, 20 acre tracts all over the place. I highly suggest going to the Brewster County GIS map and just hop in there and see how cut up this place is. It's pretty crazy, but it's really nice insofar as that makes it ideal for land investors because a 5 acre parcel when it's in a sea of other 5-acre parcels is going to have roughly the same value. The only thing that really separates it is mostly in this area, it's access, your obvious things. It's access. In the desert, you're subject to washouts. So low-lying areas, when the rain comes in, it's just going to sweep through, run silt and mud all over the place. But a lot of these properties are in an HOA, or a property owners association. Poetry is what it's called. Poatri, and that's the Property Owners Association of Terlingua Ranch. I don't know what an I is, but so Terlingua Ranch has an HOA that governs thousands and thousands of these parcels. And it really doesn't apply any restrictions on the properties. All it does is it charges the landowners enough money so that they can keep a dozer or two running through the area and just kind of tending to the dirt roads. These dirt roads are constantly washing out or degrading, and they don't pave any of the surfaces. There's like one road in Brewster County that runs through Terlingua Ranch Association down towards Big Bend, and that's Highway 118. I guess there's two. So 118 and 385 are the two main roads that come off of 90. When I was out there, I stayed in Alpine, so I took 118 down. But off of that, when you're looking at this map, you're just going to see a spider web of roads that are coming off of 118, and they're all dirt roads. They're not paved. They run over them. They kind of track them in. I guess they might have a drum roller or something because they do appear to be, compressed. But for the most part, just dirt roads. So washouts are a big deal. Next is, if you're... So I guess let's go back to why people are attracted to the area. I'm getting a little sidetracked here. So why are people attracted to the area? Okay, I'm buying cheap land out here. I have to resell slightly less cheap land in order to make some money. So why would people want to actually buy that land from me? Well, this area is like sort of cowboy Texas romantic. I don't know what you would say. It's a beautiful desert landscape. If you're not familiar with the desert landscape, a lot of people just think it's too harsh and ugly to be enjoyed, but that's not the case. I mean, a lot of people really appreciate not only the harsh conditions, the heat, the lack of water. They really like how rugged it is. It reminds them of kind of like that cowboy experience, being out in the Old West. But also, it gives them that separation from the city. A lot of people that I've sold this land to are living in Dallas, they're living in Houston, they're living in Austin, and the whole point of this property is to just get as far away from the population as possible. Go somewhere where there's no noisy neighbors, there's no light pollution, there's no restrictions on what they're doing out there, and it's affordable. So, that's really not a bad deal if you thought, hey, I could stick my hand in my pocket, find $5,000 and go buy 5 acres of land that I can do whatever I want on. Yes, there's going to be downsides. There's not probably going to be power or water or sewer or any utilities out there. But could you take an RV out there for a weekend and do whatever you want? Yeah, absolutely. So that's really the big pull, is that kind of that night sky, the romantic atmosphere, that cowboy aesthetic, and then obviously Big Bend, which is a huge, beautiful state park. And this is not a flat area. A lot of it's flat, but when you're driving through, there's all these big rocky hills and kind of like cliff faces that you're driving around seeing. Some of them are really popular. And then obviously when you get into the more mountainous area, you really get to experience some verticality that you don't see pretty much anywhere else in Texas. So if you're in Texas and you want to go climb something steep, there's really not a lot of options. You got to go down to Big Bend. And then a lot of other people that I've talked to really enjoy the aspect of the whole trip experience out to this area. So the idea of getting in your car in Dallas and driving 10, 11, 12 hours out there starts the mental separation from your day-to-day life. It starts clearing your head. You get farther and farther away from civilization. You see the scenery change, and then you're out there in this rough landscape. And it really does something. It's soul nurturing. And I did this trip when I had a property out there that I'll talk about here shortly. I actually did a whole podcast episode on that property called Flipping a Mountain. But that's why people are interested in this area. It's affordable. No one's around. It's beautiful. A lot of stuff to do out there. And no restrictions. That's a huge attraction. So when I was out there flipping land, I started with the kind of the 5-acre tracts. I got into the 10 and 20-acre tracts, and then I started searching for bigger and bigger properties. And usually the only way I could sell these things is to owner finance them. But that's really not a bad deal for how inexpensively I was purchasing these properties. I was buying these properties. I was sending direct mail. I remember one time I sent 100 letters and bought 10 properties at $100 an acre. And I think I was in it for a total of $5,000 or something like that. $5,000, and I had 10 properties. And when I resold all those properties on notes, it came out to be roughly $45,000 worth of land. Which doesn't seem like a lot, but I mean, that's a really good spread for... That is a really good spread for how little capital is invested. So where I was when I started was like I didn't have money. I needed to find areas where I could take the little bit of money I had and try to double it or triple it. And I really wanted to create this note portfolio. And that is a big issue with buying and selling land. In order to create a note portfolio, it's hard to keep the cash flow going. So you really have to start in one of these inexpensive areas or with some sort of big line of credit where you can service the debt with the notes that you're issuing. And that allowed me to do it. So I said, all right, I'll buy a property for $500 and I'll sell it for, $150 down plus a $250 dock fee and $125 a month. That was a pretty standard note for me on these 5 or 10 acre tracts. And that meant that after the first note payment, so I took the $475 or $375 on the down payment and the dock fee. I had collected 1 month's payment, and then I was in profit after that. Whereas if I was somewhere else and I was buying a property for, say, $10,000 and I was selling it on a note for $20,000 or $30,000, it would take a long time for me to recoup that investment, or I would have to charge a really high down payment, which means it'd take longer to sell. So the economics really worked out well for me in order to buy these really inexpensive properties. And the beauty of the market itself is people were really buying with that sort of romantic vision in mind of going and being unchained and being out in the wilderness and enjoying the mountains. So that was like a compelling motivation, and people didn't have to go see the property. They didn't have to go make sure a tree was in the right spot. They were like, a lot of these people were buying the property sight unseen and then planning a trip out there in the summer. And that was really fun, man. I had a lot of people give me feedback about when they actually went down there and they viewed the property for the first time. And for some people, they would pay on it for a year or two before they ever went down there. But it was so affordable and they could fit it into their budget. And this is one last motivation that works really well for this area. And it's a very genuine motivation. And that is, we live in a society where it's really hard for the average person to own anything. If you think about it, everybody's paying monthly for, they're renting their apartment or their house. They're paying a 6-year note on a car as standard. So by the time you're even close to paying it off, it's probably already falling apart. You have to go get a new one. So we're kind of in this perpetual debt cycle where we never actually own anything. And selling land in this area is so affordable that people were actually able to buy a real piece of land. And that was incredible for them. And it was a point of pride. And I ended up meeting a ton of people that had really cool stories about what they were doing with the property, their goals, their family visits. I'd get photos of them with like ATVs out there. I got to know some of the locals. Like there's a really cool cafe called the Bad Rabbit Cafe, and the guy who owns that, I sold him a couple properties that were right off 118 because he kind of wants to continue to grow the community and be a provider of food and goods and services out there. So it was like cool. I got kind of be a part of the community for a few years, and I still have a few properties out there that I have to resell because every once in a while they do default. People stop paying on them, but for the most part I haven't gone back and bought land in about a year. Anyway, so fast forward to today. So I have a few properties that have been in default, and I had somebody that has been reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I already bought a few properties from you. My notes are about done, and I want to buy a few more." So I kind of went back and I started digging through the area again, and what I noticed is there's actually been an increase in the value of the properties, and that's really cool for me because a lot of the folks that were buying land and a lot of the things that I've been saying over the past few years is when you buy land, there's a steady appreciation, okay? You may not get super wealthy overnight or anything like that, but there's a steady appreciation that's going to happen. And sure enough, I was selling property for, $500 an acre. And when you go check it out now, prices have definitely gone up. People are buying land closer to, $1,000 or $1,500 an acre. And even cooler is the fact that a lot of the people that I've sold properties to are actually developing them. You kind of run into this issue when you're selling land a lot. You're wondering like, is anyone actually ever going to use the property? Maybe they'll visit it once, but is anyone actually going to build or do anything out there because it's so remote? And sure enough, I've actually had clients that are building Airbnbs and all sorts of stuff on there, and land values have steadily gone up. So everything's been playing out exactly the way I hoped it would. You're never sure when you're operating in a market for an extended period of time. And it's beautiful. And guess what? It's not a big city. I wasn't hoping for any dramatic change in the economy. I didn't think there was some sort of new light rail, bullet train that was coming through or anything like that. It was just the nature of land itself. The nature of land itself is not, it's going to ramp up in value overnight all across the country, but you can expect steady appreciation. You can expect a property that you can use and enjoy while you're paying for it. You can still find affordable property. And a lot of people, when I've sold this, they would say this is junk land. They would say, derided it, have negative comments. But all the success stories that I witnessed along the way of people that loved the property that they bought, or they were coming back to me to buy more property. Like I just, I had a phone call last week with this guy. Hey, I want to buy all your remaining properties out there. Just send them over to me. I want to make sure they have road access. That's about it. And it's been amazing. And I've gotten to know this like bizarre little market right on the border of Mexico. And I actually ended up going there. Most of the markets that I've operated in, I never end up visiting. I've bought and sold land all over the country. But I did have this property. I guess I'll give you the brief story. I did have a property there. We were expanding into bigger and bigger properties, buying and selling properties. We started with 5 acres, 10, 20, then we got into 50-acre lots and 100-acre lots. And finally, I said, Alyssa, my wife, let's try to do a home run out here. Let's go try to find a square. A square of land is a mile by a mile. That's roughly 600, or I guess exactly 640 acres. And we started sending offers on these big boys, thinking that maybe either I would subdivide it. You can buy a square of land and cut that into 4 or 8 or 16 or whatever and just sell those and make a good return. And I ended up not hitting a full square, but I got a half square. I had somebody who came back to me and said, yes, I'll sell you my 320 acre parcel. And it was great, man. I call it flipping a mountain because it was this big cliff side. It had a huge amount of elevation in it, and right on the cliff face, it dropped down into a big washout ravine where water would pour through. And I had it on market. It went under contract 2-3 times with people who were like, I want to do an Airbnb with it. I want a place for my horses. They had all these different ideas for it, but the terrain just made it difficult for those options. We'd go to title and they'd end up lapsing. And I think we collected a couple earnest money fees or whatever. But we finally found somebody. It's embarrassing. Usually the first thing I do when I'm trying to sell a property is I'll reach out to the neighbors, and I was almost positive I did. I really think I did. I think I sent everybody my standard neighbor letter, etc. But we finally got to a point where we were like almost a year into trying to sell this thing. It had gone in and out of contract multiple times, and I was like, all right, I need to go get better marketing material. The droner that I sent out there originally got kind of crappy photos. He didn't quite have it centered on the property, so you got views of the property. It was kind of the left half of the image everywhere. It was kind of bizarre. Anyways, I needed a trip. I needed to get out of Dodge, so a buddy of mine, Jason, who we partnered on this deal with, suggested like, hey, why don't you just go down there, get some drone footage yourself. And then he had a couple properties he had me get some drone footage of. So I was like, all right, got in the truck, went down there, took the long drive, climbed the mountain side with my drone, and it was a whole ordeal. Check out the whole podcast that covers the whole deal. But the last thing I did before I left the property is I hammered in a for sale sign right on the edge of it, thinking like, who the hell's going to see this? This is like in the middle of nowhere. And sure enough, that for sale sign is what sold the property. The neighbor who I'm almost positive I sent a letter to, he called me a week later, asked me what I was selling it for. I told him the full price, cash price, and he said, all right, let's close it in 2 weeks. Done. And that was one of the biggest deals we'd ever done. Great return. So, anyways, folks, that's a brief overview of Brewster County, Texas. I hope you go check it out. I hope you go to Airbnb and kind of check out all the different unique Airbnbs. There's like tents and yurts. You can go rent a camper. You can rent a little A-frame. There's all sorts of crazy little properties out there that you can rent on 5 acres, 10 acres. And try to get a feel for that desert experience. Try to romanticize it yourself a little bit. And I think you'll find that it's really a unique place. And I hope that kind of informs you as to how pretty much every piece of this country is its own unique market. There's no valueless land in this state, in this country, except for maybe if they're like testing A-bombs there or something like that. But for the most part, it is no problem. You can find any market and buy and sell land there. You just have to know what you can buy it for, what you can sell it for. Can you sell it cash? Can you sell it on terms? Can you subdivide it? Can you add value? What is in your playbook to make sure that you can make money in the process, but you can work in any market. Folks, thank you. It was a blast spending this time with you. I had to get one more in. My wife and I are about to take our trip for our anniversary, so I wanted to make sure that I had something for y'all to mull on over the next week. If you need to buy or sell land, go to primelandexchange.com. If you are a land flipper and you need funding, check me out at landpartnerfunding.com. We'll take care of you. If you are a landowner and you're looking to partner with somebody to sell or subdivide or do some sort of appreciation strategy on your land, contact me. You can reach me at thelandfixer@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If anyone has any cool stories about flips that they've done and you want to come on and talk about it, I'd love that. So just shoot me a message over that as well. Again, folks, thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Land Fixer Podcast, and we'll see you next time.